Hello and welcome to Urban Longings. We bring you this show from Delhi, and the question that we'll try and answer is, how do we make city governance more effective? I'm sure most of us, and in fact I can say all of us, are really fed up with the way our local municipality deals with our problems. You have water problems, you have electricity problems, you have parking problems, and the list actually can go on and on. So what's the solution? We need to have structures which have better planning in place. So it's all big questions, really, how to get all of this planning into place, and we have our panel right here to help us debate on that. Let me go ahead and introduce them now. We have with us Mr. D.R. Karthikeyan, who's Advisor, Law, Human Rights and Responsibilities, Corporate Affairs, and he's also the former Director of the Central Bureau of Investigation. And of course, we have Dr. Kiran Bedi, who's a renowned IPS officer and also a social activist. We have Mr. Ajit Gulabchand, Chairman and Managing Director of HCC Limited and Chairman, Lavasa Corporation. And finally, we have Mr. Shirish, Sankhe, Senior Partner at McKinsey. Well, Dr. Bedi, let me start off with you. You're sitting in a traffic jam and you can see that there are things to be done in terms of town planning. You can see potholes in the roads. You can see that there are road works that are underway for months on end and they never see completion. But we don't know who to go to. So are we looking at a government that's napping?
I think we're looking at an unaccountable government. It's an invisible governance, it's insensitive governance, and it's corrupt governance. You see, it is all stemming out of corruption, because when you are into a corrupt governance, your whole priority is different. Your priority is not a common man. Your priority is what is in it for me. The recent result of transparency is that we have gone down 4 notches on our integrity level as a nation. We are third class now.
So you think that its integrity is the main issue that we have at hand. Huge, tossing this over to you, Mr. Gulabchand. Is it to do with just unaccountability, or is it just to do with systems that we need to have in place now that can actually make a big difference in the way functioning happens?
I think there are 2 most important things to begin with that must happen. I have been repeating this ad nauseum that we need a structure of government that allows cities to govern themselves. So I think first creating a bigger structure of every city or town where the mayor or whoever is, whatever name called, is accountable to the people of that city, and all the institutions and organizations responsible for the management and governance of the city are reporting to that particular body. Having done that is not enough, and that it is important to have right competencies. Are the people trained and adequately have the requisite competencies to do the jobs they are doing? And so when you get both these things, the structure and the competency map well worked out from the point of view of organizing, I think you will substantially improve what we are doing.
So, it looks very nice on paper, it looks very nice as a strategy report, but, simple things like we've had guests on this very show telling us that, trying to do maps or planning for a city, and this was in a town in Rajasthan, they could not get maps from the different public works departments. There is no kind of linkage. We're coming from here, from a point where, the right hand does not talk to the left, and we want to go into this extremely sophisticated system where you have proper structures in place, where there is information that can be shared, there's data that can be understood. Is it possible, Mr. Karthikeyan? Do you see this transition happening smoothly in the next couple of years?
You see, many cities about which we are proud of, a heavy monsoon you cannot drive through, you cannot even walk on the roads. And then I agree that there should be a unified authority.
So has there been an effort
unified
actually
authority,
in this area?
I don't see that happening. Even after the 74th Amendment of the Constitution, the civic bodies are not given sufficient authority. As it is pointed out earlier, the officers must be accountable to the local elected authority.
Right.
That is, must be done. And more fundamentally, whatever you may do, unless you prevent this mass migration taking place from rural areas to the cities, whatever may be the amendments and the reform you bring about, cities cannot cope with this increasing population. Unless you prevent that, whatever you do tinkering with administration in cities, it is not going to help unless, then in a country like ours where the freedom of movement is guaranteed as a fundamental right, that's possible only when you attend to what is to be done in villages to make them livable
Shirish, you're the consultant on this panel. You've seen the problems. What are the voices that you hear? Is it something that we will see happening, or is it just going to be gloom and doom in the near term?
Yeah. So as we were creating the urbanization report, we spoke to a lot of people. And as we started diagnosing what is the issue with urban governance, the whole thing emerged that India has systematically ignored its cities. On villages, actually, we found that the Panchayati Raj is much better developed than the overall city administration systems. India is the only country, other than perhaps Egypt, that does not have a political executive fully empowered in charge of a city. We looked at 50 cities, there were only 4 in that, other than Cairo. Most of them were Indian cities. Okay. Unless you first fix the structure, you won't be able to achieve a lot of things. So that's the main point I want to make at this point. There are many others.
Dr. Bedi, is it just that the structure needs to be changed now? Is that where the critical problem lies, or is it that the intent is not there to change it? Because now we clearly know where we have to go. So how is the intent going to come?
I think the biggest thing which is missing in governance in India today is trust. Does anybody trust? You go to the police station, will your report be logged? You go to a municipal corporation, will your matter be attended? You ask for information, will you get it without paying a thing? Are you assured of a response? I think the first thing is any citizen in India for any service, is he, when he steps out of the, or better when he meets a politician, does he know he's going to get a response which is based on integrity?
So then if we should talk about this whole thing about corporatizing these public works department, do you think that's going to be one way out of this problem?
Make them more accountable. You have to punish hard, remove people once they're corrupt. We are tolerating corruption. We are, in fact, Mr. Karthikeyan and I were discussing, we are surrendering to corruption today. Because
so that's
anybody
one part
and
of the
everybody's
problem.
involved.
Absolutely. So corruption is something that needs to be dealt with. But if you're also looking at getting structures into place, and that is being, the next step forward, you've actually done a lot of work on the human rights side. What do you find people coming up with? What kind of problems? And is there a way that it's being addressed?
You see, we have to bring about transparency in the decision-making process and speedy disposal of applications. For that, there was an attempt made in Hyderabad. I don't know how far it's continued or not, I don't know. There is a citizen makes an application for something, permission for something, for license, for instance. Now, what is happening is the man has to go from table to table, building to building, and pay speed money or get some political support to get everything cleared. They are so frustrated. Many people are existing only doing this work. Instead of that, they should say, if the citizen has a right for a decision to be made by the people elected by them, and those people are paid by the taxpayer. They are not the bosses. They are actually agreed to come and serve the people. They become masters and demand money for that. So within 30 days, if a particular application, license, either granted, or they should give reason why it cannot be granted, what is deficient, the petitioner should know. Otherwise, it should be taken as granted. Unless we bring about a system like this, at all levels, not only the city administration, corruption in government of India, state governments, at every level. I agree with Kiran. Today morning only they have said we have gone down 3 levels, the corruption index. Now again I would say model cities like Singapore are there. The least corrupt cities in the world are in Scandinavian cities. What we should do is send a team of people, not only at the level, how is it they are able to bring down the corruption?
Let's just hear what the people of Delhi have to say about governance of their city, what they would like to see happen. Let's just listen.
I think the government has a lot of civic agencies, things like NCD, NDMC, and the Jal board, the electricity board, and DDA, etc. So I would definitely turn to them if I have any issues.
See, I think the need of the hour is that there is perhaps one person or one department like, that you reach out to and then get your issues resolved, but that's not happening.
There is no one particular office where I can turn to and lodge a complaint or something like that.
Shirish, everybody's talking about this. You need to have that one elected person. What's the government doing about it?
See, the first thing I feel is that there is no even intellectual alignment on what we need to do on city governance. The whole sense of actually devolving power to cities, even large cities like Mumbai, Bangalore, is fiercely contested at the state government level. Now, of course, the central government can build some pressure, but it's almost required as a citizens' movement.
Mr. Gulabchand, when you did Lavasa, did you see, progressive action coming in from the state that actually helped you? There were different acts that came into being. The fact that getting land when you're trying to set up new cities is a big issue, and we've dealt with this on one of our earlier episodes as well.
Well, I think urbanization is a process that's going to be on. People are going to migrate from agricultural areas. What we need is to understand what this country needs, and the leaders need to take on to themselves that they will deliver this. And look at some of the ideas that have been brought out, which, as I've said, there are many. The question is, we are not moving fast enough to implement them. We've seen here the case of Delhi, for example. People used to quietly suffer the power shortage and curse the government and sit down, have a drink in the evening in the dark. But the moment it got privatized, what happened? You had suddenly people out on the road. What is Anil Ambani doing? What is Ratan Tata doing? Where is my electricity? And the same bureaucrats who ran it inefficiently and the politicians who acquiesced to it were saying, what are you doing, Mr. Tata? Why aren't you complying with the conditions of the privatization that we created? And here you got governance. You suddenly got Tata and Anil Ambani accountable, and the people suddenly rising to do that, simply because we changed the structure.
Because we've spoken enough about structure, but Dr. Bedi, if I had to ask you, in terms of policy regulations, we've had people really talking about the fact that clearances from the government take a long time, and there are some very archaic regulations that need to change to help give that little bit of thrust and impetus to development of our cities.
Very good. But who will change it? Who wants to change it? You need the right people at the right place. I think India has a case for reforming the reformer. There's a case for reforming the reformer. The so-called people who are sitting at the reform place themselves need to be reformed, because only then will they select Nandans and Sridharans. We have thousands of them, but we are not having them at the right places. I'm saying first start delivering with what you are accountable for, what you are appointed for, what you are being paid for, what you're being elected for, what you're being appointed for, and be measurable. And if you don't deliver, we should have the power to throw you out.
That's a point well taken, actually. Mr. Karthikeyan, you want to come in on this, because the right to information, and that's something where a lot of people would come out, not just with grievances against what the municipalities are doing, but also with grievances against many of the builders that we have.
See, now 50% of the population in Bombay is supposed to be in slums. Suppose it becomes 70%, maybe 40%, I don't know. 50% is right? Okay, suppose it becomes 70%. No army, no police can bring order and control crime in Bombay city. Because, when there is no justice, no economic, political, social justice, people will resort to violence. Now, as it is, I am told, 60% of the GDP comes out of urban areas in the country. There is no way you can neglect the urban governance. At the same time, suppose more and more migration comes from rural areas, the point which I made earlier, no administration, no structure can provide all the infrastructure facilities to the population. So look after those villages, small towns, give them better infrastructure so that they are not tempted to come into the cities and create chaos where no system, no administration can provide basic system facilities.
So we've got this.
Mr. Karthikeyan, just want to come in here. I agree with you that you need to provide better things in the villages. But the trend line is that today's 300 million urban population is going to move to 600.
No, that will become.
Yeah. Okay, that will become. So, and that part of it will be migration.
You can
so
slow
we have,
it down.
right? Yeah.
We
can, but that is actually based on the job creation and productivity. So there are lots of other forces. In fact, some of our largest cities like Delhi, Bombay are going to be bigger than most countries. Okay, even in GDP. Okay,
Already.
right?
Already,
No. I mean,
yeah.
And they're going. I mean,
Correct.
bigger than Thailand, bigger than Portugal, bigger than
Yes.
Chile. Okay, so I think that this is a crisis in the making. Already, as you said, it's a crisis, right?
One aspect of it.
Yeah.
Prevent further migration, mass migration, or slow down the migration. Like what Dr. Abdul Kalam used to say, Pura. Provide urban amenities as much as possible to small towns, villages, so that they are not tempted to come out of that and
Right.
come and live
But
in
still
miserable
urbanization is
conditions
going
in the
to
slum
happen,
areas,
right?
creating not only challenge to the urban administration, and also going to create serious law and order problem now. Crime situation, you are not going to control it. All these will indulge in ultimately extremism, violence, recruiting ground for Maoism and all these things. I am not saying don't attend to other things. First to deal with, now at least prevent, take some steps. We are neglecting village administration.
Karthikeyan, actually, you have...
There are two aspects.
So, but to provide, say, infrastructure
Yeah.
to 500 villages versus 10 towns is a far more difficult task. If you have not been able to do it for towns, where are you going to get the administrative capacity to deliver it to so many villages?
If we want to survive as a nation
Yeah.
with some peace and progress, we have to attend to development of rural areas, which we have badly neglected the last couple of decades.
While you need to develop the rural part of the country, yes, that's an issue, but urban India is equally important, because economically, if 70% of your GDP is going to come from there, you will have people there to bring that output out on the street. You need those people there. But let's just step back. We've spoken about two things. We've spoken about important governance structures that we need in place. We've also spoken about policies where the government needs to take initiative, leadership. We've also spoken about, a little bit of corporate, the role that corporates have to play in all of this. Just as we come towards the end of the discussion, I wanted to get from all of our guests just maybe 3 takeaways as to why you go to some of the other developing countries, you go to Kuala Lumpur, you go to China, and you see the progress that they've made, and you come back and you always think, why not us? I mean, why can't we have cities like that here in India? And if we had to do that, and if you were talking about 3 things that really need to be done, that need to come from the government, what would they be? Dr. Bedi, I'll start with you.
I think if I would have the power to legislate, I'll legislate Public Disclosure Act. And number 2, compulsory community participation in governance, which is the real 3 PPP. Public-private participation by the civil society community. So you make public disclosure mandatory. Secondly, have the municipal wards under the 74th Amendment functional, like the panchayats functional in the rural areas. And then with the disclosure and my participation, I can bring down corruption. And I can get the value of every money which the taxes have been collected, by which I get my worth. I think the third, I think I would say is, if we would like to legislate, right to reject. I must have a right to reject between 2 criminals whom I would have no choice. People must get a choice. If they are saying you elect A, B, C, D, none of the above should be part of law now. The point is, all the 3 things are in the hands of themselves, people who need to be reformed.
Dr. Bedi, points well said, Mr. Gulabchand. What would you say would be the 3 areas that you want to really address, have the government look at?
I think I would still repeat that we should look at the structure and create the structure for strongly elected mayors and all the institutions and organizations of the city reporting to that body, 1. Second is reorganize the structure of the governance of the city, so that, as Shirish said, that they should be more corporatized, not necessarily privatized, so that they have delivery, in the sense they are no longer measured only on the form or on what inputs are, but on their outcomes. And when you create them into corporate bodies which are accountable, then they focus more on outcomes. And that would be the next stage of the next most important thing to do. And the third most important thing I think we need to do here is that in terms of money, you'll need to spend money on all these cities. China has a much better system of devolving this. When taxes are collected, first the local region gets the money that is collected. Then some of it goes to the state and the balance goes to the center. This gives the advantage that the people that are there, so it's just a structure that is up downwards. Not that the present structure of India, which the Finance Commission said is wrong or anything, but if somehow the cities or the local regions felt that most of the money that they are getting is generated by them, is left with them, you would get a lot more accountability as well.
Mr. Karthikeyan?
Yes, I would say follow what's happening in places like Denmark. How is it? No corruption, people are happy, free education, free medical aid to everybody, law and order is perfect. Okay, forget Denmark. Forget Denmark. Forget Denmark. Take Asian cities like Seoul, which are far worse than us 50 years back. How is it they become such beautiful modern cities? No slums. And everything is people are happy. We have gone there, I'm sure all of us, we have gone. Many of the cities like that. Why can't we do that? We have the capacity to do that. The right people at the right job. And give them authority and hold them accountable. When things go wrong, sack the topmost person should be held accountable. As I rightly said, like there are people like Mr. Sridharan. Only thing is, a man like Sridharan will not indulge in any unethical activity, so they cannot get any share from him. Nobody will dare to ask him anything to do anything. So because the public are with him also today. Like that, there are people, identify them, give them the authority. They will not become partners in wrongdoings, but then they will bring about reform in administration. And then transparency. Transparency in governance should be brought about perfectly. I agree structurally there is a need for structural adjustment also to bring about better governance. And it's already late. At least now we should start doing it before the whole thing collapses.
Well, Shirish, you have the last word here, so you have lots of ideas to reckon with, and figure out your own three here.
Yeah. So 3 areas, okay? Funding, governance, and leadership. How do we get started? Okay. On funding, I would look at 2 ideas. Dash point number 1 is I will allow the cities to keep 20% of the taxes, the GST. That gets collected, okay, because that starts making the cities reasonably self-sufficient. I'll also allow them to monetize their land. There are lots of ways of doing that, right? So funding, I'll make sure that they start spending the $100 per capita per year. That is what is required to bring to world-class cities, because without money, even if you have governance, and Calcutta has perhaps good governance, but they don't have the funding. Okay, so funding has to be fixed, right? The second one is governance, and we discussed, this whole session was on governance, but the 2 specific ideas there will be on the ground level. I'll get the right people in the right job talk, because that's a short-term solution, perhaps, if the politicians are ready to do that. Like to Kiran's point, decision makers are ready to do that. So I will do that, and I will look at this overall structure of governance directly, starting from a directly elected mayor for the city, right? But a third one is about leadership. None of this will happen. None of this will happen unless, and this I am taking directly from the Prime Minister, to say that we consider urbanization and urban governance and urban funding as one of our top 3 issues. I've never heard the Prime Minister talking about urban governance or funding as one of his top 3 issues. Okay? And unless we say that urban areas are as important as rural areas, and we want to bring about a change, right, directly from Prime Minister downwards, and including some chief ministers, unless that leadership is given right now, I think none of this will start to change. So that's my third point.
Well, with that, we've come to the end of our show. I'd really like to thank all our panelists for giving us such an animated discussion, and I hope you've enjoyed watching this show as much as we've enjoyed conducting it.